Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. There is one matter that we need to take up outside the presence of the jury. One of jurors expressed a concern to the bailiff and the jury clerk, perhaps about just simply understanding or compliance with one of the rules I've been giving. And so I wanted to bring that juror out and understand a little bit more about what that concern is, and then consider whether there is just a misunderstanding of the rule or whether there's some further action that needs to be taken. I'm going to refer to this juror for the purposes of these proceedings as alternate juror number 1. If you would have alternate juror number 1 join us. Good morning. I'm going to refer to you as alternate juror number 1.
Okay.
And you expressed a concern, I believe, to the jury clerk, perhaps, or perhaps to the bailiff.
Right.
And I wanted to hear, and if you're speaking about anybody else specifically on the jury, if you could identify by number rather than by name, if that's possible.
I probably don't know their number.
Okay, well, we might be able to figure that out by figuring out what seat.
Well, yesterday when I went in, I was the last juror picked. We were sitting down, and this one gentleman kind of took charge and said, here's what we should do, and as a team. And I mean, truthfully, he rambled a bit, but what I got out of it was that we should be concerned about Durham's image. We're representing Durham, and there was reference to another trial. It wasn't specifically said what it was, but another juror didn't know what it was. And then somebody else said, well, you took the survey. And I don't know if this is, I felt a little uncomfortable about it. Just mentioned something about politics and how we're representing Durham and what's going to happen afterwards. And I thought we need to really do a good job for Durham, for Durham's image.
All right. Was your sense that, and that can be taken in two ways, and I want to know what you're thinking. One way is that we need to be responsible jurors and attentive and participate and do our civic duty in a responsible fashion, because that's required of us as citizens, and that would reflect well on Durham? Or are you suggesting that that a particular result may be better for the city of Durham?
Well,
or could you tell?
Maybe both. I mean, I may have jumped there, but that's kind of what I got out of it.
Okay, so
It didn't say what result.
I see. So it wasn't specific enough. That's how you interpreted it, but other reasonable minds could perhaps say we just need to be very careful and deliberate and thorough in our work, because that's what citizens ought to do. I mean, is that another possible alternative?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Very good. Well, let me thank you for bringing this concern to our attention. It is exactly what we need jurors to do. So thank you for doing that. I'm going to discuss the situation outside of your presence, and then we'll address it.
Okay.
So thank you very much
You're welcome.
for your for your assistance. Oh, let me ask you one more thing, ma'am. Bailiff?
Me?
Yeah. Do you happen to know what seat?
No, I don't actually, because I just got here yesterday.
Okay, well, that's fine. If we need to conclude that, we'll inquire further. So thank you very much. All right, counsel, let me just ask for the record, any objection to the dialogue I just had with juror, alternate juror number 1, just for record purposes? And I'm going to talk with you further about it, but I just want to know whether there's any concern you have about just the dialogue that we've had.
Not mistaken.
Not about the dialogue. No.
All right, very good. What I'd like to do is hold a brief bench conference then, and let's talk about this situation a bit further, and then we'll go back on the record. So we'll be at ease for a few moments.
Court's at ease.
May seat come over for the next session.
All right, following our conference in chambers, we're going to bring out each juror individually and ensure that each juror understands the full scope of the rules that I've been reciting to them throughout this trial. And in particular, the rule that requires jurors not to discuss case among themselves until they're instructed to deliberate. We're also going to make an inquiry of the jurors individually as to whether anything that has been discussed in the juror deliberation room is something that would cause them to be unable to fulfill their duty to decide this case solely upon what they hear in this courtroom, the evidence, the law, and the instructions of the court. And then the third thing will be to invite each juror, should they have any concerns about communications or any other events that occur either among themselves or otherwise that they feel may be a violation of the rule, to encourage and invite them to feel free to bring that to our attention. So hopefully simply with everyone being vigilant, there will not be any further potential violations of these rules. I'm not satisfied, based on the record that I've heard thus far, that there has been a specific violation of the rules that I've given thus far, but I want to make sure that the jurors understand that when we say don't talk about anything related to this case, that we're talking about that in a very broad sense of the term. So I believe that inquiry is appropriate at this time. Again, we'll go through that, and then I'll hear from counsel whether there's anything further that we need to take up with respect to this issue. But obviously we need the jurors to understand the seriousness of the rules that have been recited. All right, so bailiff, I'm going to ask you to just start with juror number 1, and if you'll just ask juror number 1 to come out and be seated.
Yes, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
I want to talk to you very briefly about a concern that I have. I'm going to refer to you as juror number 1. That's all right, sir. My concern is that has come to my attention that there is perhaps not a understanding or a clear understanding of the rule that I've been giving about jurors are not to discuss a case among themselves until they are instructed to deliberate. And so I'm going to have this same conversation I'm having with you with each of the jurors and alternate jurors that are on the jury, just to make sure that there is a clear understanding of that, and that any conversations that may have occurred thus far have not caused you to feel like you can't uphold the duty that you've told us during jury selection that you'd be able to do. So when I say that there's to be no discussion about this case among jurors among themselves until I instruct you to begin your deliberations, I mean that in the broadest possible sense. I mean, don't talk about anything you're hearing in this courtroom. Don't talk about anything that you may have heard or read prior to this case. Don't talk about the people involved in this case. Don't talk about anything related to this case. Talk about football, talk about your families, talk about your work, but do not talk about this case. You understand that, sir?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Now, for you personally, has anything that you have heard in the jury deliberation room, any conversations that you may have participated in, overheard, listened to, have any of those caused you to feel like you could not continue to serve as a juror and base your verdict solely upon what you hear in this courtroom based on the evidence, law, and my instruction, and the arguments of counsel? Anything?
No, sir. We're playing a lot of spades.
I'm sorry?
We're playing a lot of spades.
You're playing a lot of spades. Okay, very good, sir. That's fine. That is in full compliance with my rules. I also want to just stress to you that if at any time during this trial you feel that there is any concern that you have about a violation of these rules, whether it's within the jury deliberation room or from any member of the public or anybody else, I want you to feel free and completely at liberty to speak with a bailiff, speak to anyone to express that concern. We want to know about it as soon as it happens. That way we can take care of that issue to ensure that we have a fair trial. So if you can just commit to doing that if at any time during this process you have that concern.
Okay.
All right, very good. Thank you, sir.
No problem.
Okay, bring out juror number 2. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
I'm going to refer to you as juror number 2, if that's all right.
Yes, sir.
Sir, a concern has been expressed to me that there's perhaps not a clear understanding of at least one of the rules that I've given throughout this trial, and that rule is that there's to be no discussion among the jurors about anything related to this case until you're instructed to begin your deliberations. And what I want to do, and I'm having this conversation with each of the jurors, is I want to make sure that you understand that that rule is the broadest sense of that rule. Namely, there's not to be discussion about what you're hearing in this courtroom, what you might have read in the media, what you might have heard prior to this case, what you might have heard anywhere else, or any thoughts, opinions, anything that you might have about this case in any way, shape, or form. You can talk about football, you can talk about your family, you can play cards, you can do any of those things, but you cannot talk about this case. Do you understand the scope and breadth of this rule?
Yes, sir.
The other thing that I'd like to know is, if there has been anything that has occurred thus far in conversations among the jurors, can you assure us that you can set that aside and continue to do the duty that you told us you would be able to do during jury selection, and namely base your decision on what you hear in this courtroom, the evidence, the law, and the arguments of counsel? Can you assure us that you can continue to do that, sir?
Yes.
And the other thing I'd like to do is invite you, in the event that you feel that there's any violation of the rules or any concern that you have that a rule is not understood or that it's not being complied with, that you would feel free to bring that to our attention immediately and promptly. Mention it to the bailiff or someone else so that we can take care of that promptly and make sure that we have a fair trial for all involved. Can you do that for us, sir?
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. Bailiff, if you'll bring juror number 3, please.
Yes, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
I'm going to refer to you as juror number 3, if that's all right.
Sure.
Sir, I've been made aware of a concern that I have and I want to share with you, and that is that the scope and breadth of the rule that I've been reciting to all of you throughout this trial is perhaps not fully understood. And the rule I'm talking about is that jurors must not talk about this case among themselves until you are instructed to begin your deliberations at the conclusion of this case. That rule is intended in the broadest form possible. In other words, jurors are not to talk about what they're hearing in the courtroom. They're not to talk about the people involved in the case. They're not to talk about what they may have read in the media in the past. Anything at all about this case, how it's being conducted, how it ought to be conducted. Just simply talking about this case is off limits. Opinions about this case are off limits. You can talk about your families, you can talk about football, you can play cards, you can do any of those things, but you cannot talk about this case. Do you understand the breadth of this rule, sir?
Yes, sir.
All right. The next thing, based on anything or perhaps a misunderstanding of that rule that has occurred thus far in these proceedings, can you assure us that anything that you either heard or conversations that you participated in, that you can set those conversations aside and that you can continue to do your duty that you told us you would be able to do during jury selection, namely base your decision solely upon the evidence, the law, and the arguments of counsel that you hear in this courtroom? Can you continue to do that for us, sir?
Yes, sir.
And then finally, I want to invite you to feel free to let us know if you have any concerns about any misunderstanding of the rules or any potential violations or concerns you have about the rules. The earlier we know about them, the more we can do to protect against a possible unfairness that might result from potential violation of these rules. So I just want to invite you to feel free to do that. Speak to the bailiff about any concern you have. The bailiff will certainly bring it to my attention. I just want you to feel comfortable in doing that throughout this trial. Do you understand that, sir?
Yes, sir.
Very good. Well, thank you very much then. And if you bring out your number 4.
Yes, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Your Honor.
I'm going to refer to you as juror number 4, if that's all right.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. I want to express to you a concern that has been brought to my attention, and what I want to do is make sure that each juror understands the breadth and scope of the rules that I've been giving to you throughout this trial. I'm having this conversation with each of the jurors. And in particular, the rule that I'm concerned about is the rule that there is to be no discussion among the jurors about this case until you are instructed to begin your deliberations. That rule is intended in the broadest possible fashion. Namely, don't talk about what you're hearing in this courtroom, don't talk about the personalities involved in this case, don't talk about your opinions or thoughts about the case, don't talk about what you may have read in the media prior to this case or might know prior to this case. Don't talk about anything at all related to this case. You can talk about football, you can talk about families, you can talk about your work, you can play cards. Any of those things are fine, but you cannot talk about this case. Do you understand the scope of that rule, sir?
Yes, Your Honor.
And I want to just make sure that in the event that there has been a misunderstanding of the scope of this rule and that there have been discussions that have occurred in the deliberation room, can you set aside anything that you may have heard or participated in or overheard? Can you set that aside and continue to do the duty that you said you would do during jury selection, namely to base your verdict solely upon what you hear in this courtroom, the evidence, the law, and the arguments of counsel? Can you do that for us, sir?
Yes, Your Honor.
And then finally, I'd like to invite you to feel free at any time to express any concern that you have or any question that you have about these rules. If you feel that there's perhaps a rule that is not being understood by fellow jurors or that you perceive there's a violation of those rules, I want you to feel completely comfortable in bringing that to my attention through the bailiff or any other way so that we can address that issue early and ensure the fairness of these proceedings. Can you feel comfortable in doing that for us, sir?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, very good. Thank you very much, sir. Number 5, sir. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
I'm going to refer to you as juror number 5, if that's all right.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. I wanted to bring you out and talk with you, having this conversation with each juror, because it's come to my attention that there perhaps is a misunderstanding of the breadth and scope of the rules that I've been reciting to you throughout this trial. And in particular, the rule that I'm concerned about is the rule that jurors are not to discuss this case among themselves until they are asked to deliberate on this case at the end of the case. What that means, it should be interpreted in the broadest sense possible. You're not to talk about what you're hearing in this courtroom, the personalities involved in this case, your thoughts, opinions, or judgments relating to this case, anything that you may have read in the media or been aware of prior to this case. You're simply not to talk about anything relating to this case until you're instructed to begin your deliberations. Do you understand the scope of the rule?
Yes.
All right. Now, let me ask you, has there been any conversations that you may have overheard, participated in, or otherwise that have caused you to feel like you would not be able to continue to do the duty that you assured us that you would be able to do, namely, in this trial, render a verdict that reflects what you hear in this courtroom based on the evidence, the law, and the arguments of counsel? Is there anything that you feel has made you unable to do that?
No.
All right. The last thing I'd like to do is invite you, in the event that you have any concern about compliance with these rules, understanding of these rules, any concern whatsoever about whether these rules are being followed to the letter, that you feel comfortable bringing that to my attention as quickly as possible. You can speak to the bailiff about it. You can write a note, however you want to feel comfortable doing that. But I want to make sure that you feel comfortable bringing any concern like that to my attention so that we can address it promptly and ensure the fairness of these proceedings for all involved. Do you feel like you'll be able to do that?
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you.
Bailiff, bring juror number 6, please.
Okay.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
I'm going to refer to you as juror number 6, if that's all right.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. I wanted to talk with you about a concern that has been expressed to me, and I'm having this conversation with each of the jurors in this case, and that is whether perhaps there's been a misunderstanding of the scope of the rules that I've been reciting to all of you throughout this trial, and in particular the rule that relates to discussions among the jury about this case prior to deliberations. As you know, you're instructed not to talk about this case until you're instructed to begin your deliberations at the end of the case. That rule is intended in the broadest sense possible. That means you're not to talk about what you're hearing in the courtroom, the personalities involved in this case, anything that you may know about these matters from the media or from prior awareness or other sources. You're not to talk about your opinions, your thoughts, your judgments on anything relating to this case. Do you understand the very broad scope of the rule that I'm asking you to follow?
Understood.
Now, let me ask you, has there been anything that has occurred among the jurors in the deliberation room that, in your view, would cause you to not be able to continue to fulfill the duty that you said you would be able to fulfill, namely to decide this case based on the law, the facts, the arguments that you hear from counsel, and setting aside any perhaps prior misunderstanding of this rule? Do you feel that anything has occurred that would cause you to have to stray from that duty?
No, sir.
All right. Do you also feel comfortable, or what I would invite you to do, is to feel comfortable in bringing to my attention, through the bailiff or otherwise, any time that you have a concern about these rules? If you feel that there's a continued misunderstanding regarding these rules, or that there's a lack of compliance with the rules, or any concern or question you have about these rules, I want you to feel completely comfortable in bringing that to our attention immediately so that we can address it immediately. Would you feel comfortable doing that for us?
Absolutely.
All right, very good. Thank you very much, ma'am. If you could bring number 7, please.
Yes, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Morning.
I'm going to refer to you as juror number 7, if that's all right.
Sure.
Yes, sir. I wanted to talk to you about a concern that's come to my attention. I'm having this conversation with each of the jurors. That concern is that there's perhaps a misunderstanding of the scope of the rules that I've been reciting to you throughout this trial, and in particular the rule that requires jurors not to talk about this case among themselves until they're instructed to do so at the end of this case in deliberations. That rule is intended in the broadest form possible. In other words, it means that the jurors are not to talk about anything they're hearing in the courtroom, anything about the personalities involved in this case, anything that jurors might be aware of from prior knowledge about events relating to this case, your thoughts, your opinions, your judgments. There's to be absolutely no discussion about anything relating to this case among the jurors. You can talk about your families, you can talk about sports, you can play cards together, but you cannot talk about this case. Do you understand that, sir?
Yes, sir.
I'd also like to ask you, whether thus far in these proceedings, perhaps based on a misunderstanding of these rules, has there been anything that has occurred that would cause you to be unable to fulfill the duty that you assured us you would be able to fulfill, to judge this case solely upon what you hear in this courtroom based on the law, the evidence, and the arguments of counsel?
No, sir.
And then finally, sir, I want to invite you to feel comfortable to bring to my attention any time that you have a concern about compliance with these rules, or a concern about a misunderstanding or a further misunderstanding of these rules, or anything at all, question about these rules. Anytime you feel that there needs to be a clarification or compliance with these rules is in question, that you bring that to my attention immediately. I want you to feel comfortable and free to do that. You can do it through the bailiff. You can write the bailiff a note. You can speak to the bailiff directly. But I want you to do that immediately so that we can address the issue immediately as well and ensure the fairness of these proceedings for all involved. Do you think you'll be able to do that, sir?
Sure thing.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. We're now juror number 8, please. Good morning, ma'am.
Hello.
I'm going to refer to you as juror number 8, if that's all right.
Yes, sir.
Ma'am, I want to express to you a concern that has been brought to my attention that perhaps there's not a complete understanding of the scope of the rules that I've been reciting to all of you throughout this trial thus far. I'm having this conversation with each of the jurors to make sure there's no misunderstanding. And in particular, I'm concerned about the rule that requires that there be no discussion whatsoever of this case among the jurors until you're asked to deliberate this case at the end of the case. What that means is in the broadest sense possible. You're not to talk about what you're hearing or seeing in the courtroom. You're not to talk about the personalities involved in this case. You're not to talk about anything that you may be aware of that occurred prior to this case. You're not to talk about your judgments, thoughts, opinions about this case. Just simply absolutely nothing about this case is to be discussed among the jurors. Do you understand the scope of that rule?
Yes, sir, I do.
I'd like to also ask you whether anything that has occurred thus far in this trial in the jury deliberation room would cause you to be unable to fulfill the duty that you assured us you would be able to fulfill, and namely judge this case solely based on what you hear in this courtroom, the evidence, the law, and the arguments of counsel. Can you set aside anything that's occurred in the jury deliberation room thus far, if anything, and assure us that you can continue to do that?
Yes, sir.
And then finally, I want to invite you to feel comfortable to bring to my attention any time that there's in your mind a question about these rules, perhaps a misunderstanding of the scope of the rules, or perhaps a violation of these rules. I want that you observe. I want you to feel comfortable to bring that to my attention as promptly as possible by speaking to the bailiff, hand the bailiff a note, or otherwise communicating that concern so that we can take measures to address it as quickly as possible so that we can ensure a fair trial for all involved. Can you assure us that you will do that?
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you.
Bring juror number 9. Good morning, ma'am.
Hey.
I'm going to refer to you as juror number 9, if that's all right.
Okay.
Okay. Ma'am, I want to talk to you about a concern that has been brought to my attention. I'm having this conversation with each of the jurors, and that concern is that perhaps there's a misunderstanding of the scope of the rules that I've been reciting to you throughout this trial, and in particular the rule that says that there's to be no discussion of this case among the jurors until you're instructed to begin your deliberation of this case at the end of the trial. I want you to understand that that rule is intended in the broadest form possible. Namely, don't talk about anything that you're hearing or seeing in this courtroom. Don't talk about the personalities involved in this case. Don't talk about what you might have known about these matters before this trial began. Don't talk about your thoughts, your opinions, your views, your judgments, or anything at all related to this case. You can talk about your family, you can talk about sports, you can play cards with folks, but you cannot talk about this case.
Yes,
Do you understand the scope of the rule that I'm asking you to follow?
Yes, sir.
Now, I also want to ask you, based on anything that has occurred thus far among the jurors, do you believe that you can continue to fulfill your duty that you told us you'd be able to fulfill at the beginning of this case when we selected you, that you'd be able to judge this case based on what you hear in this courtroom, the law, the facts and evidence, and the arguments of counsel? Can you continue to fulfill that duty, ma'am?
Yes, sir.
All right. And then the final thing is I want to invite you to feel comfortable in bringing to my attention any time that you feel that any of my rules are being misunderstood, not being complied with strictly, or any concern at all that you have about that. If you will bring it to our attention as quickly as you can through the bailiff, you can hand the bailiff a note or you can talk to the bailiff. It's very important that you do that promptly so that we can take measures to address it right away. Can you assure us that you will do that for us if you have any such concern?
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Okay.
Bring bill number 10. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
I'm going to refer to you as juror number 10, if that's all right. Sir, I want to talk with you about a concern that has come to my attention, and that is that perhaps there's a misunderstanding of the scope of the rules that I've been reciting to you throughout this trial. And in particular, the rule I'm concerned about is the rule that says that jurors are not to talk about this case among themselves until they are asked to do so in the deliberations of this case at the end of the trial. This rule is intended in the broadest form possible. And by the way, I'm having this conversation, same conversation with each of the jurors. This rule is intended in the broadest scope possible. Namely, you are not to talk about among yourselves what you're hearing or seeing in this courtroom, the personalities involved in this case, anything that you might have been aware of prior to this case starting, your thoughts, judgments, opinions, anything at all related to this case. You cannot talk about it until you begin your deliberations. Do you understand the scope of the rule that I'm asking you to follow?
Yes.
The other thing I'd like to ask you is whether, based on any perhaps misunderstanding of this rule thus far, whether anything has occurred among the jurors or for you that would cause you to be unable to continue to fulfill the duty that you assured us you would be able to follow, and that is to decide this case solely upon what you hear in this courtroom, the evidence, the law, and the arguments of counsel. Is there anything that would cause you to stray from that duty, sir?
No, sir.
And then finally, I want to invite you to feel comfortable to bring to my attention any time that you feel that there is perhaps a misunderstanding of my rules or a concern about compliance with my rules, or if you have any questions at all that you feel that need to be brought to my attention, I want you to feel comfortable to do that as quickly as possible so that we can take steps to address it and ensure the fairness of these proceedings for all involved. You can bring it to my attention through the bailiff, talk to the bailiff, hand the bailiff a note, but as quickly as possible. Would you feel comfortable in doing that, sir?
Yes, of course.
All right. Very good, sir. Thank you very much. Bring juror number 11, please. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
I'm going to refer to you as juror number 11. I wanted to talk to you about a concern that has been brought to my attention, and that is that perhaps there's a misunderstanding of the scope of the rules that I've been reciting to the jurors throughout this trial. I'm having this conversation with each of the jurors individually, and the rule I'm particularly concerned about is the rule that says there's not to be discussion among the jurors until such time as you're instructed to begin your deliberations at the end of this case. There's not to be discussion about this case until that time. That rule is intended in the broadest sense possible. Namely, jurors are not to talk about the personalities involved in this case, what they're seeing or hearing in the courtroom, anything they might be aware of prior to this case. They're not to talk about their thoughts, opinions, judgments, or anything at all relating to this case. You can talk about family, you can talk about football, you can play cards, but you cannot talk about this case. Do you understand the scope of the rule that I'm asking you to follow?
Yes, sir.
Now, I need to ask you whether there's been anything that has occurred that in your mind, whether it's based on a misunderstanding of this rule or not, anything that's occurred in the deliberation room that would cause you to not be able to fulfill the duty that you assured us you'd be able to fulfill at the beginning of this trial, namely to judge this case solely upon what you're hearing in this courtroom, the evidence, the law, and the arguments of counsel. Anything that would cause you to stray from that duty, sir?
No, sir.
And then finally, I want to invite you to feel comfortable to bring to my attention any time that you feel there's a misunderstanding of these rules or a lack of compliance with these rules or any concern or question that you have at all. I want you to feel comfortable in bringing that to my attention promptly through the bailiff. Talk to the bailiff, hand the bailiff a note, however you're comfortable doing that, promptly so that we can address it right away and make sure that we can ensure a fair trial for all involved. Can you assure us that you'll be able to do that, sir?
Yes, sir.
All right, very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bring juror number 12, please. Good morning, ma'am. I'm going to address you as juror number 12, if that's all right. I want to talk to you about a concern that's been brought to my attention, and that is that perhaps there's a misunderstanding of the scope of the rules that I've been reciting to the jurors throughout this trial. In particular, the rule I'm concerned about is the rule that says there's not to be discussion about this case among the jurors until you're instructed to begin your deliberations at the conclusion of this case. This rule is intended in the broadest sense possible, namely, jurors are not to talk about what they're hearing or seeing in the courtroom. They're not to talk about the personalities involved in this case. They're not to talk about anything they might know about events that occurred prior to this case. They're not to talk about their thoughts, feelings, judgments, or opinions about this case until they begin their deliberations. Do you understand the scope of the rule that I'm asking you to follow?
Yes.
Now let me ask you whether there's been anything that has occurred, perhaps based on a misunderstanding of this rule, that in your mind would cause you to stray from the duty that you assured us you'd be able to fulfill at the beginning of this trial, namely to judge this case solely upon what you hear in this courtroom, namely the law, the evidence, and the arguments of counsel? Anything at all that would cause you to stray from that duty?
Yes, sir.
And then finally, I want to invite you to feel comfortable in bringing to my attention any time that you feel that there is either a misunderstanding of the rules, lack of compliance with the rules, or any question about the scope of these rules, that you feel comfortable in bringing that to my attention immediately through the bailiff, speak to the bailiff or hand the bailiff a note, so that we can address that issue immediately and ensure that we continue to, or that we ensure that we have a fair trial for all involved in this case. Can you assure us that you'd be able to do that, ma'am?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you very much, ma'am. Bring out alternate number 1.
This is one.
That's fine. Yeah, back row's fine. Yes, ma'am. I'm going to refer to you as alternate number 1. And I just wanted, I'm having this conversation with each of the jurors, and that is just to reiterate the scope of the rules that I've been reciting for you many times throughout this trial, and in particular the rule that relates to communications among jurors or discussions among jurors prior to being instructed to deliberate this case. This rule is intended in the broadest sense possible. It prohibits the discussion among jurors of anything that they're seeing or hearing in this courtroom during this case. It prohibits any thoughts, opinions, feelings, or judgments that anyone may have relating to this case. It prohibits anyone discussing anything that they may be aware of prior to this case. Generally, anything relating to this case is not to be discussed among jurors until they're asked to deliberate upon this case. So, do you understand the scope of the rule I've just recited?
Yes, I do.
And I want to then ask you, and perhaps I asked this earlier of you, but has anything occurred that in your mind would cause you to be unable to continue to fulfill the duty that you assured us that you would be able to fulfill at the beginning of the case, namely to decide this case solely upon what you hear in this courtroom based on the law, facts, and arguments of counsel?
No, nothing changed.
All right, you believe you can continue to fulfill that duty. And I want you then finally to feel comfortable in bringing to my attention any concern that you have about compliance with these rules, a lack of understanding of the rules, any questions with these rules. If you'll bring it to our attention immediately and promptly through the bailiff, write the bailiff a note, discuss it with the bailiff. They'll bring it to my attention promptly. To the extent it can be brought to our attention quickly, we can take measures to ensure that we can have a fair trial for all concerned. So if you can assure us that you will continue to feel comfortable in doing that.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
We're going to alternate juror number 2, please. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
I'm going to refer to you as alternate juror number 2, if that's all right. Have a seat,
Right,
sir.
thank you.
Have a seat. I wanted to talk to you about a concern that I've become aware of, and that is that perhaps there's a misunderstanding of the scope of the rules that I've been reciting to the jurors throughout the course of this trial, and in particular the rule that requires that jurors not discuss this case among themselves until such time as they're instructed to begin their deliberations at the conclusion of this case. This rule is intended in the broadest form possible, namely it prohibits discussion among the jurors of anything that they're seeing or hearing in this courtroom, anything about personalities involved in this case, anything about any events that you may have been aware of in the past, any thoughts, opinions, feelings, judgments of any sort that you have about this case. You can talk about your families, your football, play cards among yourselves, but you cannot talk about this case. You understand the scope of the rule that I'm asking you to follow, sir?
Yes, Your Honor.
I also want to ask you whether, perhaps based on any misunderstanding of this rule, whether anything has occurred that in your mind would cause you to be unable to fulfill the duty that you assured us you would be able to fulfill, which is to judge this case solely upon what you hear in this courtroom, namely the evidence, the arguments, and the law as I instruct you. Anything occurred that would cause you to stray from that duty, sir?
Nothing, Your Honor.
And I also want to invite you to feel comfortable in bringing to my attention any concern that you have about further misunderstanding of these rules, lack of compliance with these rules, or any questions or concerns you have about these matters. If you would bring them to our attention immediately so that we can take measures to address them immediately and ensure that we have a fair trial for all involved. Can you feel comfortable in doing that, sir?
Yes, I can.
Very good. Thank you very much, sir. And I might have mentioned I'm having the same conversation with each of the jurors, so I just want to make you aware that I'm having this conversation with everyone.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. Outside of the presence of all the jurors, any objections, further discussion with respect to the matter that I've just been addressing? Ms. Franks?
Not from the state, Your Honor.
Mr. Meyer?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. All right, very good. In that case, I believe we're in a position then to proceed in this matter. Anything else we need to take up before we call for the jury?
Not from the state, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
All right, if you'll bring the jurors in, please.
Yes, sir.
All right, good morning again, ladies and gentlemen. You should each have your notebooks in your chairs. If you'll just check and make sure that they are in fact your notebooks. And I believe we're now prepared to ask the state whether there's further evidence for the state.
Yes, Your Honor. The state would call Jay Covey to the stand.
getting ready. Oh, it's systems warming up, as you're saying. Okay. I got a sign of maybe some difficulty in hearing because of the buzzing noise, but that's, the clerk says that it should be resolved as soon as the system warms up. Very good. I think it's resolved.
Okay,
All right, go ahead, Ms. Mayor.
thank you. Ma'am, if you would please state your name for the jury and spell it for the court reporter.
Jeanette Covey, Jeanette, last name C-O, V as in Victor, E-Y.
And how are you employed, ma'am?
I am a crime scene investigator with the Durham Police Department.
And what are your duties as a crime scene investigator?
I identify, collect, and preserve evidence.
And were you working in April of 2011?
Yes, I
Durham
was.
Police Department?
Yes, I was.
And what capacity were you working on that date?
I was a crime scene investigator.
Do you have an occasion to get involved into the investigation that occurred April 3rd, 2011, a stabbing at Century Oaks Road?
Yes, I did.
And how were you involved in that, ma'am?
I was requested to respond to Duke Hospital to take photographs of the victim.
And that victim's name was Reginald Day?
I do not have that in my notes, but I believe that is correct.
And what did you do after you were requested to do that?
I drove to Duke Hospital and met with the investigator and took the photographs.
And what type of photographs did you take of the victim?
Digital photographs.
And were you able to take pictures of all of his wounds?
I was only able to take pictures of the bandages on his abdomen. I was told by medical staff that the bandages could not be removed and he could not be moved.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes.
May I show you what's been marked State's Exhibit number 4 and State's Exhibit number 5. You could check for a moment, see if you can identify those items.
May I refer to my notes?
Okay. What is State's Exhibit 4 and 5?
They are photographs that I took at the hospital.
And that was over what date?
I would again have to refer to my notes. April 4th, 2011.
And do these accurately depict the victim as you found him?
Yes, they do.
Have they been altered in any way?
No, they have not.
Your Honor, State will move to enter into evidence State's Exhibits 4 and 5.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
They're allowed for illustrative purposes.
Madam Clerk, I need to know. Can we turn on some of the lights, please? Thank you. That State's Exhibit number 4. If you would explain to the jury what that shows, please. Copy.
It shows the victim laying in a hospital bed.
Okay. And if you would place State's Exhibit number 5 up there. And what, if anything, does that show?
It also shows the victim in bed, however, his hospital gown has been lifted to show the bandaged wound.
And again, you said you couldn't take any other pictures. Why?
The medical staff advised that the bandages could not be removed and that the victim could not be moved.
Thank you, Officer Covey. No further questions.
cross-examination?
Yes, in
Lights.
looking,
I'm sorry, go ahead. I was asking whether you want the lights back on or,
not for this.
go ahead.
Officer Covey, in looking at that picture, is that a picture of the surgical wound or the stab wound?
I could not answer that question. That is just what I saw when I was at the hospital.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
All right, any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, ma'am. You may step down. Further evidence for the state?
Yes, Your Honor, the state would call Officer Biddett's Austin. Your Honor, may I approach to the MO?
Yes.
Step up and I'll raise your right, please. Do you solemnly swear that the information I will report in case now being heard shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Please stand and true.
Ms. Franks?
Thank you, Your Honor. Ma'am, would you please state your name and spell it for the court reporter?
Karina Biddix Alston, CARINABITTICKS-ALSTON.
And where are you employed?
I'm employed with the Durham Police Department Forensic Services Unit.
And what are your duties?
Currently, I'm a crime scene specialist, which means that I supervise a squad of 3 other crime scene investigators, and we're responsible for the collection of evidence on crime scenes.
And on April 2011, were your duties the same?
No, at that time, I was simply a crime scene investigator. I did not supervise another squad.
And did you have an occasion in April 2011 to render services to a stabbing that occurred April 3rd, 2011, Century Oaks Drive?
Yes, ma'am.
And what, if anything, did you do first involved in that investigation?
On April 4th, I was asked by Sergeant Vaughn to respond to Durham County Jail to collect a buccal swab from Crystal Mangum.
And did you do that?
I did.
And what else did you do in this case?
On April 6th, I responded to Duke Hospital to take pictures of Reginald Day and collect a buccal swab from him as well.
And did you do that?
I did.
Now, on April 6th, you were at the hospital taking pictures of Reginald Day?
Yes, ma'am.
And how did you take those pictures?
I took those pictures using a Nikon D90.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes, ma'am.
Officer Biddett's Austin, I'll show you what's been marked State's Exhibits 6 through 16. If you would take a moment and see if you can identify those as a group. And what is State's Exhibit 6 through 16?
State's Exhibit 6 through 16 are the photos that I took at Duke Hospital of Reginald Day on April 6th.
And do those photos accurately portray how you found the victim to be on that date?
Yes, ma'am.
Have the photos been altered in any way?
They do not appear to have been altered.
Your Honor, the State would move to enter into evidence State's Exhibit 6 through 16.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
They're allowed for illustrative purposes.
Thank you. If you would take State's Exhibit 6 and place it up on the Elmo. You're going to have to lighten it back up.
I'm not sure.
Your Honor, instead of the Elmo, if I can ask the witness to step down in front of the jury.
Yes.
Thank you.
It's okay.
If you step down.
Madam, if you'll be sure to speak in a loud voice so that everybody in the courtroom can hear, including the court reporter and folks seated way over here.
I'm going to show you State's Exhibit number 6 first. If you'll start sort of at this end, but walk down and show the jurors what that picture depicts. If you can tell them what that picture shows as you're showing it to them.
This was an overall picture of Reginald Day's back when I saw him on April 6th.
Did you note any injuries on his back or arm in that picture?
There was an injury located on his lower left side that was bandaged. I could not remove the bandage due to medical treatment. He also had a superficial scratch on his back and then another scratch on the back of his arm as well.
And State's Exhibit number 7, if you would tell the jurors what that shows also.
This is a close-up or a more close-up version of Reginald Day's back that starts to show the scratch that I observed.
State's Exhibit number 8.
State's Exhibit number 8 was an attempt at the scratch on his back. During the time I was taking the photos, he was in considerable pain. It was hard for him to sit up, so this one is slightly blurry.
State's Exhibit number 9.
Again, this is another photo of the same scratch located here.
And State's Exhibit number 10.
This is a close-up, better, of the same scratch, again, in the lower portion of his back.
State's Exhibit number 11.
This is a close-up of Reginald Day's face that I took on April 6th.
And are there any injuries noted by you in that picture?
There is what appears to be a black eye here on his left eye.
State's Exhibit number 12.
This is a close-up of the black eye that I noticed to his left eye.
And State's Exhibit 13.
This is an attempt at the photo of the scratch that I observed on the left side of his upper arm. It's slightly blurry, but the scratch is here. Okay, it's right there.
State's Exhibit 14.
This is a close-up of that same scratch that I observed to the left side of his arm.
State's Exhibit 15.
Is the scratch to his arm. It's a mid-range photo of it. slightly blurred. It's the same scratch that was just depicted in the photo previously.
And finally, 16, State's Exhibit 16.
State's Exhibit 16 is an overall of his left arm. This is the scratch that was visualized in the close-up picture. It's right there.
Thank you, officer, if you'll receive. Now, when you were showing the photographs, you indicated that the victim seemed to be in pain. How did the victim appear to you on this date?
Well, he was in the hospital room. He did appear to be in pain. It was hard for him to sit up and maneuver around in the bed when I was taking the photos of him.
And this was on April 6, 2011?
Yes, ma'am.
I believe you also said that you had taken a buccal swab of the defendant.
I did.
And what date was that?
On April 5th.
And would you describe for the jury what you mean by buccal swab?
When we take a buccal swab, it's for DNA purposes, and it's simply a swab of the inner cheek from whoever we're taking it from.
And what are you using to take that swab?
We use a sterile swab that's previously packaged.
And you also said that you took a buccal swab from the victim, Reginald Day?
I did.
And when was that taken?
That was taken on April 6th when I was at the hospital.
And was that done the same way you did the defendant's swab?
Yes, ma'am.
May I approach the witness again? Officer, I'll show you what's been marked State's Exhibits number 17 and 18. Starting with number 17, you can identify that.
State's Exhibit number 17 was an item that I had marked as number 27 as a buccal swab from Crystal Mangum.
So it's your agency's number 27.
Correct.
And once you took that buccal swab, what did you do with it?
Once I took it, I then packaged it and sealed it in this brown envelope and released it to our property unit.
And how did you seal it?
I sealed it with packing tape across the back here, marking it with our IR number, which is our incident number, the date that I sealed it, the time that I sealed it, the item number that was given to us or given to me by my agency, and my initials.
And State's Exhibit number 18?
State's Exhibit number 18 is an item that I marked as item number 28, which is a buccal swab from Reginald Day.
And once you took that buccal swab, what did you do with it?
I packaged it in the same manner that I did the first one, and I sealed it across the back using the same markings.
And then what did you do with it once you sealed it?
It was released to our DPD, or to Durham Police Property Unit.
Can I approach the witness again now?
Yes, ma'am.
Officer Bennett, officer, did you do anything else in this particular case?
I did not.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination, Mr. Meyer?
Yes. Good morning, Officer Bidix Austin. Just very briefly, back to State's Exhibit 6 that showed a wound on the left flank. I don't know. I looked at my approach, Ron.
Yes.
In looking at that picture, are you aware, is that the knife wound or the surgical wound?
I do not know because I did not remove the bandage.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Redirect, Ms. Franks?
No, Your Honor. No further questions.
Thank you, ma'am. You may step down. Further evidence for the state?
Yes, Your Honor. State would call Officer Coble.
Mr. Webb, have a comment, raise your right, please. You solemnly swear that the testimony you may give before the case now being heard shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Please have a seat.
Ms. Franks?
Officer, would you please state your name and spell it for the court reporter?
Marilyn Coble, Marilyn Coble.
And how are you employed?
I'm a crime scene specialist with the Durham Police Department Forensic Services Division.
And what are your duties?
Overall, we basically collect, identify, and preserve evidence.
In 2011, how are you employed?
I was employed in that same unit.
Do you have an occasion in April 2011 to become involved in the investigation of a stabbing that had occurred April 3rd, 2011, Century Oaks Road involving Reginald Day?
Yes, I did.
And what, if anything, did you do in that case?
I was requested to respond to Duke University Hospital to take photographs.
And who did you take photographs of?
Mr. Reginald Day.
And what date did you take these photographs?
I took them on April the 8th of 2011.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes, ma'am.
I'll show you what's been marked State's Exhibits 19 and 20. If you will take a moment and see if you can identify what they are as a group.
Yes, I can.
And what is State's Exhibit 19 and 20?
Number 19 is a photograph of Reginald Day in a hospital bed.
And item number 20?
Again, that's a photograph of Reginald Day in a hospital bed. It's a closer shot of his face.
Your Honor, at this time, the State will move to enter into evidence items number 19 and 20.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor. Right now, she hasn't identified that they haven't been altered in any way.
Ms. Franks?
Yes, sir. Officer Coble, do they accurately portray Mr. Day as you found him on that day?
Yes, they do.
Have they been altered in any way?
No, I do not see any alterations.
Thank you. Again, Your Honor, State will move to enter into evidence 19 and 20.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Allowed for illustrative purposes.
Officer Coble, if you'll hold up for the jury from right where you are, exhibit number 19. And again, that was a picture of the victim laying in bed. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And if you would also hold up picture number 20. And what was number 20, the close-up?
Number 20 is a close-up of his face, yes.
Thank you, officer. Did you do anything else in relation to this case?
No, I did not.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, ma'am. You may step down. Further evidence?
There is, Your Honor. If I could just check and see if one witness is here. Your Honor, State would call Jessica Posto.
Question about comment, raise your right, please. You solemnly swear that the testimony you make before
Franks?
Ma'am, would you please state your name and how you are employed?
Jessica Posto. I'm currently employed as a forensic scientist in the forensic biology section with the Virginia Department of Forensic Science Eastern Laboratory, located in Norfolk, Virginia.
And how were you employed in April of 2011 or between April and May, well, April 2011 to April 2012?
I was employed as a forensic scientist in the forensic biology section at the North Carolina State Crime Laboratory in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I performed body fluid analysis in criminal cases.
And what is a forensic biologist?
A forensic biologist, specifically in my case, I was a body fluid analyst, accepts evidence in criminal cases from throughout the state of North Carolina and will examine this evidence for the possible presence of body fluids, including blood, semen, or saliva. I'll then prepare any samples that are going to go on for DNA analysis to be sent for DNA analysis. I'll write a report as to my findings, and I'll testify in court as necessary.
And how long have you been a forensic biologist?
I was first employed with the North Carolina State Crime Laboratory in September of 2006 and worked there until the end of November 2012. And in December of 2012, I started working in Virginia, and I still currently work there.
And would you please tell the jury what your educational background is?
I have a Bachelor's of Science in Biology with a minor in Chemistry from Indiana University, and I attended graduate level classes in Forensic Science at the University of Illinois at Chicago.
And have you received any specialized education or training in the field of forensic biology since your employment with the State Bureau of Investigation of North Carolina?
Yes, at the State Crime Lab, I underwent an in-house training program. I first worked as a DNA database analyst for 2 years, and then I became a body fluid analyst for casework. As a body fluid analyst, the in-house training program included things such as reading relevant literature that's been published in the field, attending lectures put on by senior analysts. I trained doing casework under the direct supervision of a senior analyst, followed by doing a rotation under different senior analysts where I performed casework. At the end of this, I had to do a competency and a moot court to show my proficiency in the field.
Have you previously testified as an expert in the field of forensic biology?
Yes, as a body fluid analyst, I've testified in North Carolina State approximately 20 to 25 times.
Your Honor, the state would tender Ms. Posto as an expert in the identification of blood and bodily fluids.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
All right, her testimony will be received as proffered.
Did you have an occasion to look at evidence involved in a case that occurred out of Durham, April 3rd, 2011?
Yes, I did.
And what did you do as far as any evidence in that case?
The evidence in the case was submitted to be looked at for the possible presence of blood. So on most of the items in the case, I looked for the possible presence of blood and then chose, based on those results, what would go on for DNA analysis.
And what type of analysis did you do on each of these items?
When I'm looking at an item for the possible presence of blood, we have a screening that's a color change test, and I'm simply looking from a change from a sample of the item from clear to pink, which would mean that there are chemical indications for the presence of blood. Depending on the item, whether in this case it would be a swab or I had knives and handles submitted and also some clothing submitted, what I do is first take the item and do a visual examination and see if there's any blood-like staining. Everybody knows what you've bled on yourself at some point. You know what kind of stain blood gives. And so I'll first look, and if there are any visible stains, I'll test each of those stains to see if it comes up positive on the screening test. If I don't see any visual stains, I'll actually do a rubbing of the item in which I take a piece of filter paper, which is simply a soft piece of paper, and actually rub down the item and test that to see if there was anything that I couldn't see visibly.
Did you do that with all the items that were submitted to you in this particular case?
There were 3 items I did not examine, but all of the rest of those, that's the procedure that I followed.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am, I'll show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 21. If you would take a moment, see if you can identify that exhibit.
Yes, I can.
And what is State's Exhibit number 21?
State's Exhibit number 21 is a swab of red stain from couch.
And what, if anything, did you do with that exhibit?
When I received it, I would have gone ahead and opened it up, and in this instance, it's a swab, so I would have done that screening test for blood that I talked about. And this item was positive, so it gave chemical indications for the presence of blood.
And what did you do with that item once you finished with it?
This item was sent on for DNA analysis.
Now, when you received item number 21, State's Exhibit number 21, what condition was it in, the packaging?
The manila envelope was sealed.
When you say sealed, would you explain to the jury what you mean?
When I say sealed, typically in this instance, it would be sealed with tape and then have the initials and, in this case, date that it was sealed by the person who collected the item.
And I believe you said you would have opened it, taken the item out and tested it?
Yes.
Once you were through with your testing, what would you then do with that item as far as the packaging?
I will reseal the area where I open it, which is separate from the seal from the original person. We try to avoid breaking into their seal. So I would have resealed it, and then it would have gone into an additional package with all the rest of the evidence to go on for DNA analysis.
And you said it gave the indications of blood?
Yes.
Now, do you do any type of confirmatory test?
Not typically, unless there's a specific reason it's requested. We do not do confirmatory testing for blood.
Okay, and why is that?
To do a confirmatory test is going to use up more sample from what we had originally. In order to conserve it for DNA, and the DNA process that's used in forensics is human specific, we go ahead and conserve it and just do the screening test for blood.
May I approach the witness again, Your Honor?
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am, I'll show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 22. If you take a moment and see if you can identify that exhibit.
I recognize it.
And what is State's Exhibit 22?
State's Exhibit number 22 is a knife that was submitted.
And what did you do with State's Exhibit number 22?
Again, I would have opened it up and examined it as I spoke of previously.
And what, if any, results did you get from your examination of State's Exhibit 22?
State's Exhibit number 22 failed to reveal chemical indications for the presence of blood, so it was negative for that screening test.
And what did you do with that particular item after you tested it?
State's Exhibit 22 I would have sealed back up, and then it was kept within the laboratory and sent on for analysis by another section.
And how did you receive item number 22 as far as packaging?
It was in this plastic container, and the container was sealed.
And what did you do with it once you examined it as far as the packaging?
I would have resealed it with my own seal before sending it on for further analysis.
If I may approach the witness again, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm now showing what State's Exhibit number 23. Can you take a moment, see if you can identify that?
I recognize this item.
And what is it?
State's Exhibit number 3 is a knife that was submitted in the case.
And what, if anything, did you do with that item?
Again, I opened it up and did that screening test for the presence of blood. And State's Exhibit number 23 gave chemical indications for the presence of blood, so it was positive for that screening test.
And what did you do with that item once you got a result?
In this instance, since it was an actual physical item, a knife that was submitted, and it gave chemical indications for the presence of blood, I took 2 separate swabbings from the item. I swabbed the blade of the knife, which is where the positive result came from, to send on for DNA analysis. And separately, I swabbed the handle of the knife to be sent on for DNA analysis.
And when you took those swabbings, how do you do a swabbing? Would you explain that to the jury?
A swab is, it looks like an elongated Q-tip where it's a wooden stick and cotton on one end. I will wet the swab with sterile water and actually just simply rub down the item to make sure that anything that's on the item I get off. And then I will dry the swab and package it separate. The swabbing from the blade and the swabbing from the handle were packaged separately into manila envelopes.
And what did you do with those manila envelopes?
Those were sent on for DNA analysis.
May I approach the witness again?
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am, I'm showing you what's been marked State's Exhibit number 24. If you take a moment, see if you can identify that.
I recognize the items that are within it, but I don't believe that I actually created this envelope.
As far as items number 3-1 and 3-2, would that be the swabs that you indicated?
Yes, those are the swabs from the blade and the swab from the handle that I took from the knife.
And are they in State's Exhibit number 24?
They're listed as being in here, yes.
Now, when you took them, you said you had packaged them. What size manila envelopes did you package it in?
We refer to it as a coin envelope. It's, I'd say approximately maybe 3 by 5 inches.
And then did you seal it, put your initials? What did you do with it?
Yes, once I've dried the swabs and put them in that, I will seal it with my initials and basically a description of the item. And we have stickers that within the laboratory that indicate the case and item number. I would place that on top on the envelope, and then it would be sent on for DNA.
May I approach the witness again?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, now I need to go find some scissors. There you go up here.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Sherman?
Yes, ma'am.
If you would take a moment, please, and look in State's Exhibit 24 and see if 3-1 and 3-2 that you spoke of is in there. There. And how are you able to recognize them?
They have the sticker that I spoke of with the case and item number for the laboratory, as well as the descriptions of the items that I wrote on there and my date and initial.
If you would please just place them back in the State's Exhibit 24. May I approach the witness again, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Now I'll show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 25. If you'll take a moment and see if you can identify that number.
I do.
And what is State's Exhibit 25?
The State's Exhibit 25 actually has 3 items contained within it. They are a swab of red stain from the kitchen counter, the hallway carpet, and the mattress in the master bedroom.
And how did you receive those items?
These items were received all within this one envelope in a sealed condition.
And what did you do with them once you received them?
I would have again opened it up and done that that screening examination for the presence of blood.
And did you do that on each of those items?
I did, and the 3 items within State's exhibit all gave chemical indications for the presence of blood, so they were positive for that screening test.
And what, if anything, did you do with those items?
These 3 items were sent on for DNA analysis.
And how did you package them before you sent them on for DNA analysis?
I would have just repackaged them back into this same manila envelope and resealed it.
I'm here first, witness, Your Honor.
Yes, ma'am.
Now I'll show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 26. You take a moment and see if you can identify that number.
I recognize it.
And what is it?
State's exhibit number 10 is a blade that was submitted.
And what, if anything, did you do with that item?
Again, I did that screening test for the presence of blood, and State's exhibit 26 failed to give chemical indications for the presence of blood, so it was negative for that screening test.
And what did you do with it once you finished it?
This item, I resealed it, and then it was kept within the laboratory but sent to another section for further testing.
Was it sealed condition when you received it?
Yes, it was.
May I approach the witness again, Your Honor?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm showing you what's been marked State's Exhibit 27. If you take a moment, see if you can identify that item.
I recognize it.
And what is that item?
The State's Exhibit 27 is a knife handle that was submitted.
And how did you receive that item?
It was received in a sealed container in this manila envelope.
And what did you do with that?
Again, I did that screening test for the presence of blood, and State's Exhibit 27, the knife handle, failed to reveal chemical indications for the presence of blood, so it was negative for that screening test.
And then what did you do with that item?
I would have put it back in, sealed it back up with my initials, and then it was kept within the laboratory and transferred to another section for further testing.
Approach the witness again now. And now I'll show you what's been marked State's Exhibit number 28. You take a moment to see if you can identify that.
I can recognize this item.
And what is that item?
State's Exhibit number 28, there's several knives within it that were submitted.
And what did you do with State's Exhibit number 28?
I would have again opened it up, and each individual knife within it, I would have done that screening test for the presence of blood. And for State's Exhibit 28, all of them failed to reveal the chemical indications for the presence of blood, so they were negative for that screening test.
And what did you do with the items once you tested it?
Put them back within the container, sealed it up, and then they were kept within the laboratory and transferred to another section for further testing.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes, ma'am.
And now I'll show you what's been marked State's Exhibit number 29. If you take a moment, see if you can identify that.
I recognize it.
And what, if anything, is State's Exhibit 29?
State's Exhibit number 29 is a blade that was submitted.
And what did you do with that number?
Again, I would have opened it up and done that screening test, and State's Exhibit 29 failed to reveal chemical indications for the presence of blood, so it was negative for that screening test.
And what did you do with that item after you finished testing it?
I placed the item back within the container, sealed it up, and it was kept within the laboratory and transferred to another section for testing.
And what way did you receive that item? How was it sealed?
Yes, it was sealed.
Finally, approach the witness, Your Honor.
Yes, ma'am.
Now I'll show you what's been marked State's Exhibit number 30. If you would take a moment, see if you can identify that item.
The State's Exhibit number 30 is a knife handle that was submitted.
And what did you do with State's Exhibit number 30?
I would have taken it out and done the screening test for blood, and State's Exhibit number 30, the knife handle, failed to reveal chemical indications for the presence of blood. It was negative for the screening test.
And did you receive that item in a packaged and sealed condition?
Yes, I did.
And when you finished with that item, what did you do with it?
I put it back into this manila envelope, sealed it, and it was kept within the laboratory and transferred to another section for testing.
May I have personal witness, Your Honor?
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am, I'm showing you what's been marked State's Exhibit number 31. If you take a moment, see if you can identify that.
State's Exhibit number 31 is a knife blade that was submitted.
And what did you do with that item?
Again, I would have taken it out and performed that chemical test for blood. And State's Exhibit 31, the knife blade, failed to reveal chemical indications for the presence of blood, so it was negative for that test.
And did you receive that item in a sealed condition?
Yes, I did.
And what did you do with that item once you tested it?
I put it back within the plastic container, sealed it up, and it was kept within the laboratory and transferred to another section.
May I have personal witness, Your Honor?
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am, I now show you what's been marked State's Exhibit number 32. If you take a moment, see if you can identify that item.
State's Exhibit number 32 is a blade that was submitted.
And was it sealed when you received it?
Yes, it was.
And what did you do with it?
Again, I would have taken it out and performed that same test. And State's Exhibit 32, which is a blade, failed to reveal chemical indications for the presence of blood, so it was negative for that test.
And what did you do with it?
I would have put it back in the container, sealed it back up, and it was kept within the laboratory and transferred to another section for testing.
May I have personal witness, Your Honor?
Yes, ma'am.
I now show you State's Exhibit number 33. If you take a moment, see if you can identify that.
State's Exhibit 33 is State's Exhibit 33 is a knife blade that was submitted.
And what did you do with that item?
Oh, I'm sorry, I misspoke on that one. I was looking at a separate item. I'm sorry about that. State's Exhibit 33 is actually a knife handle that was submitted. And again, I would have taken it out and tested it with that screening test for blood. And State's Exhibit 33 failed to reveal chemical indications for the presence of blood. It was negative for the screening test.
And what did you do with it?
State's Exhibit 33, I put back within this manila envelope, sealed it up, and it was retained within the laboratory and transferred to another section for testing.
Ms. Franks, we're going to take a 15-minute recess, and we'll resume at 12 o'clock. So members of the jury, let me remind you of the rules and instructions. Don't talk among yourselves or with anyone else about this case. Please don't form or express any opinions about the outcome. No media or independent investigation regarding these matters. And please have no conversation or communications with parties, witnesses, or lawyers. You'll be sure to leave your notebooks in your chairs. Gather in the deliberation room at 12 o'clock, and we'll bring you out as a group. Everyone else, please remain seated. outside the presence of the jury, are there any matters that we need to take up before we recess for a few minutes?
No, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
All right, very good. We'll be in recess till 12 o'clock. Let's sit down there.
And chance I can get some water.
Yes. Except, make it a picture and I'll show you what's going on.
But you can turn those like here. But when you press the change the light. So you gotta give it a few minutes for the next one. That's the bottom light. That's the bottom. I mean, it's that light that they're showing.
Yeah, we just turned